This is a very short video about fundamental attribution error. It is a cognitive bias and it will affect us at work, whether we're Christians or not. Stay tuned and I'm going to tell you about it and teach you how to get around it. Hi, my name is Shawn Sommerkamp and this is Motivationeer Christian Coaching. Fundamental attribution error is a cognitive bias, which means it's happening all up here. People tend to overemphasize character defects when explaining another person's negative behavior and underemphasize external factors that might explain why they're behaving that way. This was first coined by Lee Ross, a Stanford social psychologist, in 1977. His research was kind of on the back of another team's research from earlier in the 70s, and he very simply put it like this: we assume someone's actions reflect who they are, rather than just saying, hey, this is how they are in this situation because of some external thing that we don't necessarily see. We look down on people. We overattribute the negative behaviors to character defects. He's late because he's lazy, or he's late because he's selfish. We underattribute their negative behavior to situational context. He's late because he got stuck in traffic. He's late because he's got a bunch of children and it was probably hard getting out the door. I want to now go beyond fundamental attribution error, which I'm going to call from this point forward FAE. Many people believe that FAE describes the times that we blame external factors for our negative behavior instead of maybe considering we behaved poorly because of our own character defects. We don't do that very often. We almost always protect our own ego first, and we blame our poor responses on something external to us. This is called actor-observer bias. It does include FAE, but it goes a step beyond. This bias was proposed by Edward Jones and Richard Nisbett in 1971. That's why Lee Ross kind of built what he was doing off of that. They said it more simply like this: when we explain our negative actions, we tend to blame the situation. I snapped at my coworkers because I was exhausted and under a lot of pressure. I'm overworked, I didn't get a lot of sleep last night. When we explain someone else's negative behaviors, we tend to blame their character. She snapped at me because she's rude and impatient. That's the FAE. There was a 2006 meta-analysis where 173 research studies around this bias, actor-observer bias, were all collated and analyzed together to really tease out some important nuances that I really want to share because I think this is the most important part of all of this. The nuances showed that actor-observer bias happens almost all the time when these three things happen. Number one, when the person that we're judging is doing something that's very unique or very unusual. When we've not experienced this thing that this negative behavior this person is doing, maybe ever in our career, or it's very, very rare and unique, we will almost instantly say that they have a bad character. If we do something that's very rare or very unique, we will instantly say it's a circumstantial thing. I don't act like this normally. It's just something, it's a very rare situation. Okay, that's nuance number one. Nuance number two is when we happen to be a little bit closer to the person we're judging. Because we think we know them better when they behave poorly or negatively in some way, we think or quickly conclude it's because of their bad character. We very infrequently give them the benefit of the doubt because we know them better, so we have all this quote-unquote evidence now. Nuance number three is when the outcome of the situation is in fact positive. This nuance means it's flipped. If a positive event happens, people tend to credit their own good character for that. But if something positive happens to someone else, we tend to credit luck or some external circumstance. Man, I just want to start laughing because it's ridiculous. Here's an example. I succeeded because I'm talented. She succeeded because she got lucky. I failed because there was cheating going on. He failed because he's not competent. We see this, I think, sometimes in our own spiritual journey. That's why it's so important to know. When things are not going great, we say we're being tempted or attacked by the devil when we do something stupid. When things go good, we tend to pat ourselves on the back. This is why Jesus told that little parable about healing those 10 people and only one coming back and thanking him. Even when we do thank God, we tend to say, God loves me. It's him watching out for me. What does this mean for us overall as Christians in the workplace? It is clear we make judgments of others and ourselves because of a self-serving bias. We can summarize FAE and actor-observer bias as self-serving. We default to that. We will go to greater lengths to protect our ego when things go wrong, but take credit for things that go right. We don't invest the time to protect others' dignity when they do something wrong, and we quickly conclude they have a defect when those things go wrong. Why does this matter for us? Okay, you're probably way ahead of me on this because in the marketplace, we are called by Christ to be full of grace and humility and sound judgment. We want to be keenly aware of these things so that we can be full of grace, humility, and sound judgment. We can avoid the traps of these biases when we're aware that they are very likely in us, that we don't get a pass because we're Christians. So I'm going to give you 4 quick ways on how to avoid this fundamental attribution error bias and this actor-observer bias. Number 1, by being objective and fair. When we realize that we might unfairly blame others for their actions while excusing our own, helps us become more objective and just in our relationship viewpoints of others when we're at work. This is going to ultimately build trust and very important allies and advocates for us in our career. People are going to be watching us. When we see that, when they see that we're not rolling our eyes when someone else does something stupid, they're going to realize, you know what, this is someone I can trust. This is a relationship I want to take deeper because they're going to probably do that with me. They're not going to look down on me when I mess up or blow it. Number 2, practicing what I'm going to refer to as the shoe on the other foot technique, which is not necessarily what you think. Here's why. Instead of assuming someone is lazy or rude or unkind, we can consider first external pressures that they might be facing, just like we would for ourselves. This means we're not putting ourselves in their shoes, we're putting them in our shoes. We say, if I acted like they just did, blowing up in the, blowing my top at the corporate headquarters, for example, what would I explain in that situation that would kind of let me off the hook? We put them in our shoes. This is a way for us to learn how to be just. Number 3, focusing on growth instead of fault. If we assume people can grow and improve rather than being defined by their mistakes, we foster stronger teams. This is in fact what we assume about us as Christians, right? God gave us grace, we've been forgiven, so when we mess up, we accept the grace from God and then strive to be better. Let's now default to that position when others mess up. Let's assume, you know what, they have the same potential that I did to grow. Okay, maybe they're not Christians right now, but they can still grow. They have the potential to achieve that future growth. This will allow us to take the pressure off of judging them. And then lastly, number 4, of course, I'm going to say, we want to change our own internal dialogue. Instead of taking all the credit for success, blaming all the failure on circumstance, we can practice analyzing internally what we're supposed to own by instant default. And we immediately determine I'm going to be thankful to God when things go good. So we get into this habit for this step 4. When we do something stupid, we take responsibility immediately and apologize and own it. When something goes great for us, we immediately give credit to God. This, I think, is Psalm 127:1, which is a passage I just absolutely love. Unless the Lord builds the house, those who labor build in vain. This will ultimately lead to humility and grace. Okay, to close, I'm going to share with you 2 final passages just by summarizing them, which I think very, very much speak to these biases. Matthew 5, 3 through 7 basically says this: let's first take that big old plank out of our own eye instead of trying to pull that little piece of dust out of the other person's eye. We don't want to be in that mode. Jesus taught this 2,000 years ago. This is, hey, don't do actor-observer bias. Okay, and then Luke 7:47, paraphrased, the one who's been forgiven much will love much. The one who's been forgiven little will love little. He's telling us to remember how much God has forgiven in our own pathetic lives. It doesn't mean we're supposed to look down on ourselves. It just means we give the other person grace when we realize and keep it front of mind, you know what, God's forgiven me a lot. When we remember that, it's going to be so much easier to love them and not judge them. I do want to know what you think about this. I'd love to hear your comments below. Thanks for watching. Please be sure to like and subscribe and turn on notifications so you'll know when I create a new video. Please also consider becoming a member at Motivationeer.com. Your membership really supports this channel. And don't forget, your career is not just a way to make a living, it's a way to transform the world.